I'm Luke, 39, father of two, and apparently the designated responsible one in my family, which in my case means the one who always ends up paying for everyone else's mess. Christmas had always been my mom's favorite time of year. When we were kids, she'd go overboard. Stockings, cookies, matching pajamas, carols blasting from her old stereo. But this year, when she said, "No gifts this year, we're keeping it simple," I actually believed her. She'd call me in early December. "Luke, things are tight," she'd sighed over the phone. "Your father's pension is delayed, and your brother's still catching up on bills. Let's just do dinner, all right? No gifts. The kids will understand." I looked at my two little ones, Ella, 9, and Max, 6, sitting on the couch building Lego castles. I didn't want them to be disappointed, but Mom sounded serious. "Okay, Mom, we'll focus on being together this year," I said. My wife, Sarah, wasn't thrilled. "Your mom said that last year," she reminded me, "and still showed up with gifts for your brother's family." "I know," I said, trying to sound optimistic. "But maybe she means it this time." She sounded sincere. Sarah had given me one of those looks, the kind that said you'll regret this. Fast forward to Christmas Eve. Snow falling outside, that warm yellow light spilling from my parents' living room, and the faint smell of cinnamon rolls in the air. It should have been peaceful, but I had this weird knot in my stomach. Everyone was there already. Mom in her usual red sweater, Dad watching football, my brother Nate lounging on the couch with his wife, Danielle, and their two teenagers, Tyler and Mia. They were glued to their new iPhones. New iPhones, still in plastic wrap. I blinked. "Wait, are those?" "Yeah," Tyler interrupted, grinning. "Grandma and Grandpa got us the 15 Pro Max." He held it up like a trophy. Mia added, "And we're going to Disneyland next month." My heart sank. Ella's hand tightened around mine. Max just stared, confused. I turned to Mom, who looked caught off guard for half a second, then smiled that dismissive, cheerful smile of hers. "Oh, they've just been through so much this year, Luke. You know, Nate lost his job for a while. We wanted to cheer the kids up." I felt my face burn. "You said no gifts this year, Mom." "Yes, well," she brushed it off like she was flicking away dust. "It's Christmas. You can't have kids without some magic." Sarah's jaw tightened. Ella looked down at her empty lap, whispering something I almost didn't catch. "Did Santa forget us?" That one hurt. I forced a smile, ruffled her hair, and said softly, "No, honey, Santa never forgets." But inside, something cracked. Dinner was worse. Nate bragged about how Tyler had been working hard in school and deserved to be rewarded. Danielle went on about how they had found really thoughtful gifts for Mom and Dad. My parents beamed, unwrapping designer scarves and fancy watches while I sat there with my kids, pretending to enjoy cold turkey and mashed potatoes that had gone gluey. At one point, Mom leaned toward Sarah and said, "You didn't have to come empty-handed, you know. A small gesture would have been fine." Sarah froze, her fork midair. I jumped in before she could say something she'd regret. "Mom, you told us no gifts." Mom shrugged. "Well, yes, but I didn't mean it like a rule. It's the thought that counts." The rest of the night blurred. Laughter that didn't feel right. That thick, silent tension you can't cut through. And the kids, quiet, polite, holding back tears while Tyler showed off his AirPods and Mia paraded her new hoodie. When it was finally over, I helped my kids put on their coats. Mom called after me, "Don't be like that, Luke. Don't make it awkward." I smiled, calm, polite, the way I'd been trained to my entire life. "It's not awkward, Mom. Merry Christmas." On the drive home, Ella fell asleep against the window, clutching the small paper ornament she'd made for Grandma that had gone unnoticed on the table. Sarah sat quietly beside me. I could feel her anger radiating off her. "Luke," she finally said, "your mom humiliated us." In front of the kids. I didn't answer. I just kept driving through the snow, headlights cutting through the dark. That night, while everyone slept, I sat in my office. My computer screen glowed pale blue. I pulled up my banking app and stared at the list of recurring payments. Spotify Family Plan, Netflix, Amazon Prime, Disney Plus, the shared phone plan, even the family Dropbox subscription. All of them were linked to my card. For years, Mom had asked me to cover small things because I made more money and was better with tech. It had become normal. Family accounts, shared cards, autopays. I never really questioned it until now. I hovered over the cancel button on the first subscription. My hand shook, Not from anger, but from years of swallowing it. Years of pretending things were fine. Click. Spotify, canceled. Netflix, canceled. Prime, canceled. Phone plan, transferred authorization pending. By the time I was done, I'd cut off every shared expense tied to my name. It wasn't about money anymore. It was about respect. I shut my laptop, leaned back, and for the first time in years, I felt something close to peace. The next morning, my phone buzzed before dawn. Once, twice, then again. 58 missed calls by 9 a.m. Mom, Dad, Nate, even Danielle. Then came the pounding on my door. Sarah looked up from her coffee. "Guess they noticed," she said dryly. I opened the door, and there they were, Mom, Dad, and Nate, all standing on my porch in their coats, faces red from the cold, and something else entirely. Mom's voice trembled, not from sadness, but outrage. "Luke, what have you done?" And that's when I realized this wasn't going to be a conversation. It was going to be a war. Mom's voice had that sharp edge she used whenever she felt out of control, like she couldn't believe someone would dare to go against her. She stood there, snow melting into her hair, eyes flashing. Behind her, Dad looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight, while Nate just crossed his arms, smirking slightly, like he'd been waiting for this moment. "Can we come in?" Mom asked, though it didn't sound like a request. I stepped aside, keeping my tone neutral. "Sure, come in." Sarah caught my eye from the kitchen, silently mouthing, "Don't lose your temper." She handed me my coffee mug as they filed into the living room. My parents sat down on the couch like it was their house, while Nate flopped into the recliner, scrolling his phone like he owned the place. "Luke," Mom started, folding her hands in her lap, "your father and I woke up this morning to find every subscription canceled, every shared account blocked. Netflix, Prime, even Spotify. Do you realize how humiliating that is?" I blinked. "Humiliating?" "Yes," she snapped. "We couldn't even listen to our morning playlist. Everything said payment method declined." I called Nate, and he said his phone plan wasn't working either. Then Danielle tried ordering groceries. Same thing. Dad cleared his throat, trying to sound reasonable. "Son, maybe there's a misunderstanding." "There's no misunderstanding," I said quietly. "I canceled everything that's in my name. I've been paying for all of you for years. I didn't think you'd notice so fast." Nate laughed, low and smug. "Oh, so this is about the gifts, huh? You're really that petty." I turned to him. "Petty? You watched my kids sit there empty-handed while yours opened $1,000 presents. You didn't say a word." "Not my fault you took Mom's words literally," Nate shot back. "She meant no big gifts." Mom jumped in, raising her hand like a referee. "Luke, you're being childish. It's Christmas. Your brother's family went through a rough year. We wanted to make them feel loved." I could feel my patience slipping. "And what about my kids? Did they not deserve to feel loved too?" Mom rolled her eyes. "Oh, don't be dramatic. They're young, they'll forget." Sarah, who'd been silent until now, put down her mug with a sharp clink. "They won't forget." Ella cried herself to sleep. That made Mom pause for half a second, but only half. "Oh, please. Kids are emotional. You should have handled it better, Sarah. You're their mother." The room went still. I could practically hear Sarah's teeth grinding. "Mom," I said slowly, "you humiliated my kids. You made us sit there like outsiders in our own family. And when I finally draw a boundary, you show up here like I committed a crime." Mom's tone softened, the fake soft tone she used when she wanted to manipulate me. "Sweetheart, you know I didn't mean it like that. You're my son. We've always helped each other. This family has shared everything." I nodded. "Exactly. Shared. As in, I pay for it, and everyone else uses it." Nate groaned. "Oh, for God's sake, Luke. You're acting like it's some massive sacrifice. What? $10 here, 20 there. You make good money, man. Stop acting like we drained your savings." I turned to him slowly. "Do you even know how much I've paid for all of you over the years?" He shrugged. "Who cares? You chose to." Mom jumped in, trying to regain control. "You're twisting this. Family helps family. You've always been the one with stability, and your brothers had some setbacks. You've been blessed, Luke. Isn't it your duty to share your blessings?" "Duty?" I repeated, my voice low. Dad finally spoke up. "Let's calm down. We can fix this. Maybe Luke can just put the accounts back, and we'll make sure to." "To what?" I interrupted. "Say thank you. Pretend Christmas didn't happen." Mom leaned forward, her tone sharp again. "Luke, stop making everything about money. You're overreacting. It's not about who paid for what. It's about love. Then why does your love always come with a price tag? I asked. That hit her harder than I expected. She froze, blinking. Nate looked between us, uneasy for the first time. But then Mom's face hardened again, like she couldn't allow herself to lose ground. You've always had a tendency to misinterpret kindness as control, she said coldly. You've never been grateful, Luke. Not even as a child. There it was. The classic guilt trip. Sarah whispered under her breath. Here we go. Mom continued. We supported you through college. We helped you buy your first car. And now you're turning on us because of a few gifts? I can't believe how ungrateful you've become. I leaned back, forcing myself to stay calm. You didn't pay for my college, Mom. Grandpa did. And that car? I paid half the down payment from my summer job. You just like rewriting history when it makes you look generous. For a moment, silence filled the room. Mom looked like she'd swallowed something bitter. Then she smiled, that tight, polite, weaponized smile. You know, maybe you should take a break from us for a while. You clearly have resentment. Maybe I do, I said. But resentment doesn't grow out of nowhere. Nate stood up suddenly, shaking his head. This is insane. You canceled everything over some presents. You need to grow up, man. You're poisoning the family with this attitude. Poisoning the family? I repeated. I've been holding this family together. You've been acting like a martyr, he shot back. Nobody asked you to pay for everything. You did that to feel superior. That one stung more than I expected. Not because it was true, but because that's exactly what he believed. That my effort, my help, my financial support were all self-serving. Sarah spoke up before I could. He did it because your mother guilted him into it every single time. Luke, you're the responsible one. Luke, your brother's struggling. Luke, just this one time. It was never one time. Mom stood abruptly, eyes flashing. Enough, Sarah. This is between me and my son. Sarah didn't flinch. No, it's between you and his boundaries. And you can't stand that he's finally setting them. Dad sighed heavily. Everyone calmed down. This isn't helping. But Mom ignored him. Boundaries? She repeated mockingly. You want boundaries, Luke? Fine. Don't expect us to include you in anything going forward. Family dinners, holidays, birthdays. You want to separate yourself? You're on your own. Nate smirked. Guess you'll miss out on Disneyland too. That did it. Sarah stood up, her voice calm but sharp as glass. We'll survive without Disneyland. But maybe this family needs to learn what it's like without Luke's credit card. Mom gasped like Sarah had just cursed at her. Excuse me. I got to my feet too, slowly measured. You know what, Mom? Maybe that's exactly what we all need. A little distance. Mom's face softened again, the switch flipping instantly. Luke, honey, don't do this. Family's all we have. You're just upset right now. Let's sit down and talk. But I was already walking toward the door, holding it open. You've done enough talking for one day. She hesitated, eyes darting to Dad for backup, but he just looked tired. Nate stormed out first, muttering something about me ruining Christmas. Mom lingered by the door, her voice trembling again, this time with guilt instead of anger. You'll regret this, Luke. You're breaking the family apart. I met her gaze. No, I'm just done being the glue that holds together people who keep tearing me down. She left without another word. When the door finally shut, Sarah exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for an hour. Well, she said, that was something. I leaned against the door, trying to process everything. My hands were shaking. It wasn't just anger, it was sadness. Grief, even. Because deep down, I knew this fight wasn't really about subscriptions or gifts. It was about years of being the backup plan, the safety net, the reliable son who always made it right. But that morning was different. For the first time, they'd realized I could say no. And that realization terrified them. The next few days were quiet, almost too quiet. No calls, no messages, not even a happy new year. It was like we'd been erased. Then, one morning, Sarah came into my office, holding her phone. You might want to see this, she said. It was a Facebook post. Mom's Facebook, of course. A picture of Nate and his family sitting around a Christmas tree, smiling, holding up their iPhones. The caption read, "Some people forget the true meaning of family, but will always have each other." The comments were filled with sympathy. You're such a strong mother. Ignore the ungrateful ones. Family means sticking together. I didn't comment. I didn't even message her. I just stared at the screen for a long time. And that's when I realized this wasn't over. Not even close. The Facebook post stung more than I expected. Not because of the picture itself. I'd seen my mom's performative, perfect family posts before, but because she was using me as the villain again. It was subtle, coated in those sugary, guilt-drenched words she'd mastered over the years. Some people forget the true meaning of family. The some people was always me. For a week, I said nothing. I kept my head down, worked, spent extra time with Ella and Max, and tried to shake off that heavy, bruised feeling that always came after dealing with my family. Sarah and I started planning a small New Year's Eve dinner. Just us, the kids, and a couple of close friends. No drama, no expectations, just peace. But peace never lasts long in my family. It started with a phone call from my Aunt Linda, Mom's sister. She has always been the type to just check in, while secretly enjoying the gossip she's stirring. "Luke, honey," she said sweetly, "I don't want to get in the middle of anything, but did you really block your parents from their phone plan? Your mom's been so upset." I sighed. "Aunt Linda, I didn't block anyone. I canceled the plan that was under my name. They're free to start their own." "Well," she said, "you left them stranded. They couldn't even call the doctor last week." "That's not true. They could have called from Dad's phone. It's on their own account now." She went quiet for a second. Then came the real reason for her call. "You know, it's just such a shame. Your mother's been saying how much she misses the kids. She told me you're keeping them away from her." That one hit hard. I'm not keeping anyone away. She humiliated them on Christmas. Maybe she should apologize first. Aunt Linda clucked her tongue. "Oh, Luke, you've always been so sensitive." She meant well. "Don't punish her for being generous with Nate's children." "Generous," I said, my voice low. "That's one word for it." By the time I hung up, I could already feel the wave forming. That ripple effect Mom always caused when she played the victim. Within hours, messages trickled in from cousins I hadn't spoken to in years. "Hey man, heard about the family thing. Hope you make up soon. Your mom loves you. Bro, don't be stubborn." And then, the one that made my stomach twist, a message from my boss. "Hey Luke, just checking in. Everything all right? Someone sent an email to HR about your family conflict. Said you've been struggling mentally and taking it out on relatives." Sounded serious. HR forwarded it to me. I stared at the screen, rereading it 3 times. My hands went cold. No one else in the world would have done something like that except my mother. When Sarah came home, I showed her the message. She read it slowly, her face hardening by the second. "She's trying to ruin your reputation now," she said quietly. "She knows your work means everything to you." I could barely speak. Why would she do this? What's her endgame? Sarah set down her purse. "Control. Same reason she always does everything." That night, I called my dad. It went to voicemail. Then I texted him. "Dad, I need to talk to you about something serious. Please call me." He didn't reply. A few days later, I drove by their house after work. Their lights were on, and Nate's car was in the driveway. I almost turned around, but something told me to go through with it. I parked, walked up the icy steps, and knocked. Mom opened the door, all smiles like nothing had happened. "Oh, look who it is." My favorite son finally decided to visit. I ignored the sarcasm. "Can we talk?" She stepped aside, and I saw Nate sitting on the couch, laughing at something on his phone. Dad was in his recliner, pretending to read a newspaper, but not actually turning any pages. "I got a message at work." I began. "About an email sent to HR. Someone wrote that I've been unstable and harassing my family." Sound familiar? Mom's face went blank for a second, that tiny flicker of guilt she couldn't hide, before she recovered. "Luke, I don't know what you're talking about." "Really?" I pulled up the printout I'd made and set it on the table. The email mentioned things only you'd know. Like me paying for your phone plan. Like Christmas. Nate leaned forward, pretending to be concerned. "Wow. Sounds like someone's really out to get you, man." "Cut the act," I said. "It's you or her." Mom gasped like I'd slapped her. "How dare you accuse your family? We would never do something so cruel." I stared at her. "Mom, you've lied to me before. You told people I was keeping my kids from you. You've twisted things for years. This is different, though. This could have cost me my job." Dad finally lowered his newspaper. "Enough," he said, voice tired. "Your mother's not perfect, but she'd never do that." "Then who did?" I demanded. Mom put a hand over her heart, her voice trembling. "Luke, sweetie, maybe you should see someone. You've been so tense lately. Maybe it's stress." That word, stress, was her favorite way to dismiss me. I turned to leave, but she followed me out onto the porch. Don't walk away like this, Luke. You're scaring me. You've always been so intense when you feel cornered. I laughed bitterly. You mean when you can't manipulate me anymore? Her eyes narrowed. You're making a huge mistake. You think cutting us off will make you happy, but one day you'll come crawling back. You always do. That line stayed in my head for days. You'll come crawling back. But the real betrayal hadn't even happened yet. That was still coming. It happened 2 weeks later. I was at work when Sarah called, her voice tight. Luke, have you checked your account today? No, why? Because there's a $5,000 withdrawal from our joint account. What? My stomach dropped. I didn't make that. It says transfer to your parents' name. Did you give them access again? I froze. No. I changed everything after Christmas. I pulled up my banking app and stared at the transaction. Sure enough, $5,000 sent from my account to Margaret Hill, my mother. I called her immediately. She answered like nothing was wrong. Hi, sweetheart. Did you take money from my account? A pause. Then, calmly. Technically, I didn't take it. You had me as a secondary on that account from when we helped you buy your house. I just used it for an emergency. What emergency costs $5,000? I snapped. Your brother's car broke down, she said matter-of-factly. He needs it for work. I'll pay you back when we can. I was shaking. You stole from me, Mom. Her tone shifted instantly. The guilt trip mode activated. Luke, how can you say that? We're family. Families help each other. You've always said you want Nate to get back on his feet. Why are you making such a big deal out of this? Because you went into my account without asking. She sighed dramatically. You're overreacting again. If your father or I really needed it, wouldn't you help us? That's not the point. The point, she cut in, her voice icy now, is that money clearly means more to you than family does. I couldn't even speak. I just hung up. Sarah was waiting for me when I got home, pacing the living room. You have to file something, Luke. That's theft. I nodded slowly, but my head was spinning. Calling the bank felt like crossing a line I wasn't sure I could handle. Reporting my own mother? It felt wrong, but so did letting her get away with it. That night, I found an email in my spam folder from the bank. Your cosigner has requested a new debit card linked to your account. If you did not authorize this, please contact us immediately. My mother had tried to get a new card. In my name. I sat there staring at the screen, feeling something inside me harden. The realization that she wasn't just manipulative, she was dangerous. She didn't see boundaries, didn't see limits. To her, everything I owned was still the family's. Sarah sat down beside me quietly. You see it now, don't you? She said softly. I nodded. Yeah, this isn't just emotional anymore. It's theft. It's betrayal. Then it's time to stop playing nice. I looked at her, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel powerless. I felt clear. The next morning, I called the bank, froze the account, and requested a new one with no secondary users. Then, I made an appointment with an attorney, not because I wanted to sue anyone, but because I needed to protect my family. But word travels fast in families like mine. Before I even reached the lawyer's office, Mom called again, voice trembling, desperate. Luke, please don't do this, she begged. If you tell the bank I took the money, they'll close my account. We could lose everything. You should have thought of that before taking what wasn't yours. I was trying to help your brother, and you hurt me instead. There was silence on the line. Then, coldly, if you go through with this, don't expect to ever see us again. You'll be dead to this family. I didn't say anything. I just hung up. I sat in my car outside the law office, staring at my reflection in the rearview mirror. I didn't recognize the man looking back. Tired eyes, clenched jaw, a hollow sort of calm. That was the day I realized my family wasn't just toxic. They were capable of betraying me in ways I hadn't even imagined. And as much as it broke me to admit it, I knew this wasn't the end of their games. It was just the beginning. I didn't sleep much that night. Even after filing the fraud report and freezing the accounts, I just lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to the faint hum of the heater and the soft breathing of my kids down the hall. It was one of those long, gray nights where your mind won't shut off, where you replay every word, every scene, wondering how it all got this bad. I'd always known my mother could be manipulative, but this was the first time I'd truly felt unsafe because of her. Not physically, but emotionally, financially, spiritually even. She'd crossed from guilt-tripping and emotional control into full-on betrayal. And the worst part? She didn't even see it as wrong. For the next few days, I went through the motions: work, school drop-offs, dinners, but everything fell off. Sarah noticed. She always noticed. She tried to keep things light around the kids, but at night she'd find me sitting in my office, just staring at my computer screen, the cursor blinking over an empty email draft addressed to my mom. "What are you writing?" she asked softly one night. "I don't know," I said. "An explanation, maybe. Or a goodbye. I can't tell anymore." She sighed, resting a hand on my shoulder. "You don't owe her explanations, Luke." "I know," I whispered, "but it feels like I'm cutting off part of my own body. Like, she raised me to believe that family is everything. That walking away means failure." Sarah kneeled beside my chair, looking up at me. "You're not walking away from family. You're walking away from abuse." That word hung in the air, abuse. It felt too heavy, too final. But deep down, I knew she was right. Still, even knowing what I knew, part of me kept hoping Mom would just apologize. Admit what she did. Try to fix it. That tiny piece of hope was the only thing stopping me from moving on completely. That hope died 2 weeks later. It started with a letter. Not an email, not a text. An actual envelope in my mailbox, addressed in my mother's handwriting. I almost didn't open it, but curiosity got the better of me. Inside was a handwritten note and a folded piece of paper that looked like a printout from a lawyer's office. The note read, "Luke, we've been patient and understanding, but your actions have caused us a lot of stress. We've decided it's best to formalize things so there are no more misunderstandings. You owe us repayment for the family loans we gave you years ago. See attached. Once this is settled, we can move forward. We love you and hope you'll make the right decision. Mom." I stared at it for a full minute before unfolding the second sheet. It was a document listing supposed family loans, a total of $42,800. The list included things like support for Luke's first car, $6,000. Assistance during college years, $15,000. Help with wedding costs, $8,000. Family support over the years, $13,800. There was even a line at the bottom. Failure to repay within 90 days may result in legal action. I felt my stomach twist. She was charging me for things she used to brag about doing out of love. I called her immediately. No answer. I tried again. Straight to voicemail. When she finally called back that night, her tone was perfectly calm, almost businesslike. "I assume you got our letter," she said. "Our letter?" "Yes, your father and I both agreed. It's only fair. You've benefited from our help over the years, and now that you've turned your back on the family, we need to protect ourselves." "Protect yourselves from what?" I demanded. "From me not paying for your subscriptions anymore." "Luke," she said in that slow, condescending tone that always made me feel like a child, "this isn't personal. It's just a matter of fairness. You stole from me, Mom." She ignored that. "You've always been the successful one. You'll make this right. I know you will." I hung up on her before she could say another word. My hands were shaking so badly I had to set my phone down. Sarah found me sitting at the kitchen table, the letter spread out in front of me. She read it once, then twice, her face hardening. "She's trying to bankrupt you," she said quietly, "or scare you into submission. I think she just wants control," I muttered. That night, I finally broke. Not in an explosive way. There were no shouting matches, no broken plates, no slammed doors. Just quiet, suffocating despair. I went out to the porch, sat on the cold steps, and cried for the first time in years. Not angry tears, just exhaustion. I cried for my kids, who'd seen their grandmother's mask slip. For Sarah, who'd had to watch me unravel. For myself, for still wanting my mother's love even after everything. And maybe a little for the boy I used to be, the one who still believed his family would always protect him. In the following weeks, my parents' campaign against me went into full swing. It wasn't enough to threaten me privately. Mom had to make sure everyone knew her version of the story. I started hearing from mutual friends, old neighbors, even distant cousins. "Hey, Luke, your mom mentioned something about you owing her money. Is everything okay?" One of my coworkers, who happened to live near my parents, told me she'd run into my mom at the grocery store. "She said you've been under a lot of stress and that you're not thinking clearly," my coworker said gently. "She's worried about you." That's how she did it. Always playing the concerned mother while quietly poisoning the well. Even Dad joined in, though in his typical passive way. He called one night, his voice low and heavy. "Son, maybe just pay her something. To make this go away. You think I owe her?" He hesitated. "You know how your mother gets. She won't let this drop. It might be easier for everyone if you just gave her something. I'm done paying for her peace, I said flatly. He didn't respond. After that, he stopped calling too. The silence that followed was worse than any argument. My parents' house, once where my kids used to run around and laugh, became off limits. Family gatherings stopped including us. Birthdays passed without so much as a text. Then, in early February, Ella came home from school with tears in her eyes. "Grandma came to school," she said, voice trembling. I froze. "What do you mean?" "She was waiting outside after class. She said she wanted to give me something. I told her I wasn't supposed to talk to her without you, and she got mad. She said you were trying to turn us against her." Sarah nearly dropped the dish she was holding. "She what?" I called the school immediately and spoke to the principal, who confirmed it. "Yes, Mr. Hill, she was here today. She didn't come inside, but a teacher saw her by the gate. Said she was asking which classroom Ella was in." That night, something inside me snapped. All the sadness, all the guilt, it turned into something colder, sharper. I realized that as long as I kept hoping she'd change, she'd keep finding new ways to hurt us. So I started making quiet plans. I met with my lawyer again. We drafted a formal response to her debt notice, rejecting every claim and threatening legal action if she continued harassing us. We also added a restraining clause. If she attempted contact with my children without consent, we'd pursue it further. When I told Sarah, she hugged me so tightly I could feel her heartbeat. "This is how you protect them," she whispered. "This is how you protect yourself." But despite doing everything right, I still felt hollow. Like I'd cut away something I couldn't get back. The nights got longer. The messages from family stopped completely. And for the first time in my life, I felt utterly alone, not just physically, but emotionally. It was strange. I'd built a career, a home, a life for my kids. But without my family's approval, it all felt incomplete. Like I was living a version of success no one believed in. One night, I found myself scrolling through old photos on my phone, birthdays, barbecues, holidays. There was one of Mom holding Ella as a baby, smiling so warmly it almost didn't seem real. I couldn't reconcile that woman with the person who'd tried to ruin me. I didn't notice Sarah standing in the doorway until she spoke. "You're grieving her," she said softly. I nodded. "Yeah, I think I am. She's still alive, but she's gone, Luke. You have to let her go." I didn't answer. I just stared at the photo a little longer, then deleted it. From that night on, I stopped waiting for an apology. I stopped expecting a reconciliation. Instead, I focused on rebuilding, slowly, quietly. I opened new accounts, transferred bills, and filed paperwork to separate every last tie that linked us financially. I started seeing a therapist, too, something I'd resisted for years. And little by little, the fog started to lift. I still had moments of weakness, like when I drove past their house and saw Dad out front shoveling snow, or when I overheard Ella asking if Grandma still loved her. But I didn't call. I didn't text. Because I finally understood something I should have realized a long time ago. Sometimes, walking away isn't cruel. It's the only way to survive. Still, there was one last thing I hadn't faced yet. One thing that would change everything again. A letter arrived in early March. This one wasn't from my parents. It was from their lawyer. And inside was a single sentence that made my blood run cold. "Your parents have filed a claim for partial custody visitation rights of your children." My hands went numb. Sarah gasped when she saw it. They were trying to take my kids. That was the moment I hit true rock bottom. When I realized they weren't just trying to hurt me anymore. They wanted to own everything I loved. I didn't know it was possible to feel rage and fear at the same time. The kind of cold, shaking disbelief that comes when you realize someone you loved is capable of something unforgivable. The day that letter came, I sat at the kitchen table for almost an hour, just staring at it. The words blurred together, partial custody visitation rights, like a nightmare that didn't make sense. They weren't even subtle about it. They were using the legal system to force their way back into my kids' lives, after months of chaos and betrayal. Sarah stood behind me, her hands trembling as she read it over my shoulder. "They've lost it," she whispered. "This is insane." "It's worse than insane," I said quietly. "It's strategic." I knew exactly what Mom was doing. She'd realized she couldn't guilt me, manipulate me, or financially control me anymore. So she was attacking the one thing she knew I'd never risk losing: my children. I spent the next 2 weeks meeting with attorneys, gathering documents, and reliving every miserable detail from the past 6 months. My lawyer, a calm, gray-haired woman named Denise, listened carefully as I explained everything: the financial theft, the harassment, the school incident, even the loan letter. When I finished, she folded her hands and said, "You're dealing with a classic pattern of control. Narcissistic family dynamics often escalate like this when the scapegoat finally breaks away." Scapegoat, I repeated, almost laughing. That's exactly what I've been my whole life. Well, she said with a half smile, it sounds like it's time to stop playing that role. We built the case piece by piece, printed emails, phone records, even the school's written report about the day my mom showed up uninvited. Every document felt like a brick in the wall I was finally building between us. It was exhausting, but there was something liberating about it too. For once, I wasn't reacting, I was acting. I wasn't just surviving her chaos. I was taking control of my life. While the case was being processed, I started focusing on things I'd neglected for years: myself, my career, my home. I poured my energy into work. I'd always been reliable, but now I was driven. Maybe it was the anger, or maybe it was the need to prove that my mother's version of me, unstable, ungrateful, weak, was a lie. Whatever it was, it worked. I started getting noticed. In March, my boss called me into his office. "Luke," he said, smiling, "you've been doing exceptional work these past few months. We're expanding the regional division, and I'd like you to head it." I was stunned. "Are you serious?" He nodded. "You've earned it. You've been solid under pressure, even with everything going on." I knew what he meant. Word about my family drama had gotten around, thanks to Mom's email to HR. But instead of sinking me, it somehow made my quiet professionalism stand out even more. That night, I told Sarah, and she hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe. "See," she whispered, "good things happen when you stop giving bad people your energy." And she was right. We started to rebuild, not just financially, but emotionally. The kids were happier, too. I noticed it in small ways. Ella laughing more, Max asking to help me with weekend projects. For the first time, our house felt like a real home. Calm, safe, peaceful. Then something unexpected happened. One of my coworkers, a friend named Greg, invited me to speak at a local business seminar about managing stress and leadership. I hesitated at first. Public speaking wasn't my thing, but Sarah convinced me to do it. So I told my story. Not the whole messy family part, but the lessons I'd learned about boundaries, burnout, and rebuilding your confidence when life hits hard. To my surprise, people listened. Really listened. Afterward, a woman came up to me with tears in her eyes and said, "You have no idea how much I needed to hear that." My mom's the same way. I drove home that night feeling lighter, like maybe my pain could actually mean something. The momentum didn't stop there. Within months, I was invited to do another talk, then a podcast, then a short online interview that went viral locally. Nothing huge, but enough to make me realize that my story, or at least the lessons behind it, had value. Sarah joked that I should start a blog. "Call it Breaking Free from Family Drama," she laughed. I actually did. It started small, just a few posts about boundary setting, financial independence, and emotional manipulation. I wrote under a pseudonym at first, but within weeks, emails started coming in from people who recognized themselves in my words. Some of them were heartbreaking: sons, daughters, even parents themselves, all stuck in toxic family cycles they couldn't escape. Writing became therapy. For the first time, I wasn't hiding. I wasn't walking on eggshells. I was owning my story. Meanwhile, Mom's legal stunt backfired spectacularly. Denise filed a formal counterclaim, backed by every documented incident of harassment, fraud, and emotional manipulation. We even included the school report about her showing up uninvited. When the family court mediator reviewed the evidence, she didn't just deny their visitation request, she issued a warning. Any further interference with my kids would result in a restraining order. The day I got that notice, I sat in my car and just breathed. It wasn't triumph I felt, not exactly. More like release. They couldn't touch us anymore. Sarah cried when I showed her. Ella didn't fully understand, but she smiled when I told her grandma wouldn't be bothering her at school again. For the first time in a long time, our home was quiet. No constant buzzing phone. No anxious glances at every message. Just peace. But peace has a strange quality after years of chaos. It feels fragile, like it could shatter at any second. So I decided to build something stronger. I used part of my promotion bonus to take the family on a real vacation, not the kind of obligatory family trip we used to have with my parents, where every moment was staged for photos and approval. This time, it was just us. The beach, the kids laughing, Sarah smiling under the sun. On the last night, we sat by a small bonfire as the sky turned orange and pink. Ella roasted marshmallows while Max drew shapes in the sand with a stick. Sarah leaned against me and said, "You realize you've changed, right?" I smiled faintly. "For better or worse?" "For better," she said. "You used to live your life waiting for permission, for approval. Now you just live." Her words stayed with me. When we got back home, I doubled down on the blog. I changed the pseudonym to my real name. I started writing weekly posts about family estrangement, financial independence, and emotional resilience. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming the narrative. Within months, the blog grew faster than I expected. People shared my articles on social media, and soon I started getting interview requests, one from a national parenting podcast, then a mental health magazine. The irony wasn't lost on me. The same story my mother tried to use to destroy my reputation was now helping me build something real, something good. One afternoon, I came home from work to find Sarah in the living room with her laptop. "You need to see this," she said. She turned the screen toward me. A popular online magazine had just published an article titled, "When Cutting Off Family is the Healthiest Choice: One Father's Story of Freedom and Growth." It was about me. They'd interviewed me weeks before, but I hadn't expected them to run it so prominently. The comments section was full of messages from people saying things like, "This story gave me the courage to walk away, and I thought I was alone." For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like someone who'd finally taken back control of his life. Still, part of me knew it wasn't over. My mother had gone quiet, but she never stayed quiet for long. Silence, in her world, was just another weapon, the calm before another storm. One evening, after putting the kids to bed, I got a call from an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something in me said to pick up. "Hello." There was a pause, then a familiar voice. "Luke." It was my father. He sounded older, tired, like the weight of Mom's schemes had finally caught up to him. "Can we talk?" he said quietly. "Just you and me. It's important." I hesitated, torn between anger and curiosity. Because even though my life was finally moving forward, part of me still wanted to know what he had to say. And something in his voice told me that whatever it was, it would change everything again. When I heard my father's voice on the phone, my first instinct was to hang up. Every previous conversation with him had ended in some quiet betrayal. Him defending Mom, him minimizing what she'd done, him asking me to be the bigger person. But something about the way he spoke this time stopped me. It wasn't commanding or defensive. It was weary. "Luke," he said again, almost whispering, "please. I need to see you. Alone. Just one conversation." I didn't answer right away. My pulse thudded in my ears. "Why?" I finally asked. "Because there are things you don't know," he said. "And if I don't tell you now, you'll never hear them." It was quiet for a few seconds. Then he added, "I'm not calling because of your mother. I'm calling because of you." That line hit me differently. My father had never said anything for me before. Everything he did was to keep the peace, to protect Mom from any kind of confrontation. I agreed to meet him. We chose a small cafe halfway between our homes, neutral territory. I arrived early, sitting in the corner booth where I could see the door. My stomach felt like it was filled with lead. I didn't know if he was coming to apologize, manipulate, or ambush me. When he walked in, I barely recognized him. His hair had gone almost completely gray, and he looked smaller somehow, like the last few months had drained the air out of him. He gave a hesitant smile before sitting down across from me. "Thanks for coming," he said softly. I nodded but said nothing. He ordered black coffee. I just sat there, arms crossed, waiting. After a moment, he sighed. "I'll get straight to it. You were right." I blinked. "About what?" He looked down at his hands, his wedding ring glinting faintly in the light. "About your mother. About how she treats you. About how she's treated all of us." I didn't know what to say. He'd never admitted anything like that before. He continued, voice low. "I've spent my whole marriage trying to keep things calm. I thought if I didn't push back, she'd soften. But she never does. She just finds new ways to control people." He paused, taking a shaky breath. "I've watched her manipulate you your whole life. The guilt trips, the silent treatment, the fake generosity. I should have stopped it. There was something raw in his tone. Shame, maybe. For the first time in years, he looked like a man who realized how much damage silence can cause. I stared at him. Why are you telling me this now? He rubbed his temples. Because I think she's planning something worse. I can't stop her anymore, but maybe you can. My stomach tightened. What do you mean? He glanced around like he was afraid someone might be listening. She's talking to a lawyer again. Not the custody one. A new one. She's been telling people she's going to set things right financially. That you owe her everything you've built. She keeps saying your success belongs to the family. I sat there frozen, my fingers tightening around the coffee cup. So she's trying to come after me again? Legally. He nodded. I think so. She's been gathering papers, bank statements, old documents. Some of them. I think she's altered. I found her in the study late at night going through old files, scanning things into her computer. I ran a hand through my hair. Unbelievable. She doesn't see it as wrong, he said quietly. She sees it as her right. You've always been her golden investment, until you stopped obeying. He looked up, his eyes glistening. Luke, I'm telling you this because I'm done helping her. I'm done pretending she's reasonable. You have to protect yourself completely. Not just financially, legally. I leaned back, trying to process it all. What's her endgame, Dad? What does she even want now? He hesitated. Control. Always control. She can't stand that she doesn't know what you're doing, that you've built a life without her fingerprints on it. She told me last week, if Luke wants to cut me out, he'll see how that feels when I control his name. That made me go still. Control my name? He nodded slowly. I think she's trying to file something under the family trust. Your grandfather's trust. That caught my attention instantly. My grandfather, her father, had set up a small trust decades ago. It wasn't a fortune, but it included old property deeds and a few assets that had appreciated over time. I hadn't thought about it in years. It was supposed to be divided equally between Mom, Nate, and me. She can't touch that, I said firmly. Grandpa's will was clear. Dad gave me a sad smile. You're assuming she'll play fair. I felt something click inside my head. That subtle, cold clarity that comes right before you stop reacting and start planning. I asked him to send me whatever he could find. Documents, letters, copies, anything. He nodded. I'll try, he said. But if she finds out, I'll protect you, I said automatically. It was strange, saying that to the man who'd never protected me. When we parted, he looked at me for a long moment before saying, Luke, you're not crazy. Don't ever let her convince you that you are. That night, when I got home, I sat in the dark of my office going through my old files. Grandpa's will, copies of property records, some old correspondence. And then I found it. A letter Grandpa had written me years ago, one I'd forgotten about completely. It wasn't long, just a short handwritten note tucked inside an old envelope. Luke, you're the only one I trust to keep the family legacy alive. Not because of money, but because you understand its value. If anyone tries to twist what I leave behind, you'll know what to do. I must have read that line 20 times. You'll know what to do. I didn't at the time. But now I finally did. Over the next few weeks, my father quietly sent me what he could, scanned documents, photos of papers he found in the study, even a USB drive full of old digital records. And buried inside one of those folders was something unbelievable, a series of emails between Mom and a local attorney. In them, she was asking about transferring ownership of assets tied to the Hill family trust, and whether a non-consenting heir could be deemed inactive if contact was lost. In other words, she was trying to declare me absent. That was the moment the last piece fell into place. She wasn't just angry or controlling anymore. She was trying to erase me from the family on paper. But what she didn't know was that, over the last year, my position had quietly changed. Thanks to my promotion, I now oversaw regional financial partnerships for my company, which meant I had strong connections with legal firms, banks, and private trustees. I also had access to compliance experts who could easily verify the authenticity of any legal filings. So, I called in a few favors. Discreet ones. I met with an estate attorney, explained the situation, and showed him the emails. He whistled softly and said, If what you're saying is true, she's committing fraud. You can stop this before it even reaches a judge. We started drafting a counteraction, a legal freeze on the trust to prevent any unauthorized movement. In the meantime, I quietly moved my own assets into a new holding account, one Mom didn't even know existed. I also began documenting everything. Every call, every message, every letter. I kept it all meticulously organized, not out of paranoia, but preparation. Because deep down, I knew my mother. She'd never stop until she thought she'd won. And the only way to end it was to let her think she had. The setup came together over months. I played my role perfectly, polite, silent, detached. I stopped responding to her entirely, giving her the illusion that I was backing down. I even removed my name from public-facing parts of my blog and business listings. I wanted her to believe I'd disappeared from the legal picture, that her plan was working. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, I fortified everything. The trust, my accounts, my business, my reputation, all protected by a wall of airtight documentation and verified filings. Sarah was the only one who knew the full extent of what I was planning. "You're setting a trap," she said one night as we reviewed the papers together. "Not a trap," I said quietly. "Just a mirror. She's going to show the world exactly who she really is." Sarah smiled faintly. "And you'll be ready when she does." I nodded. "This time, I won't just defend myself. I'll make sure she can never hurt us again." And for the first time since this all began, I didn't feel afraid of my mother. I felt ready. A month later, the first sign came that she was taking the bait. A court notice arrived, a request to transfer trust assets under new managing authority. Her name was listed as the sole acting administrator. She thought she'd finally won. But what she didn't realize was that I'd already filed the counterpetition the day before hers hit the clerk's desk. And when the time came to face her in court, I wouldn't be walking in as the son she thought she could control. I'd be walking in as the man she created, the one who finally learned how to play her game better than she ever could. It didn't feel like revenge at first. It felt like math, careful, methodical, the slow stacking of facts until the picture they painted could no longer be ignored. The rage that had driven me at the beginning had smoothed into something colder and steadier: strategy. I'd spent months making sure that when the moment came, I would be calm, indisputable, and implacable. Denise and the estate attorney were my generals. Sarah was my quiet lieutenant, the one who kept our home steady while everything else spun. Dad gave me what he could without Mom knowing. He handed over old ledgers and receipts he'd found, things that undercut the neat narrative she'd built for neighbors and friends. My father's hands shook the day he slid a manila envelope across a small cafe table, but there was relief in his eyes, like a long-held secret finally being lifted. We didn't go for theatrical exposure. There were no dramatic confrontations, no public shaming posts. Instead, we built a case that left no room for doubt. Every forged line on her bill of grievances had a counter. Emails where she'd asked attorneys about declaring heirs inactive were time-stamped and shown next to bank requests she'd attempted to submit. The $5,000 withdrawal didn't exist in isolation. It was bracketed by patterns of attempted access, by the request new card that landed in my spam folder, by the way she'd shown up at my daughter's school gate uninvited. Each small lie had been a thread. We pulled them until the whole tapestry unraveled. There was an ethical satisfaction in it. For years, my mother had weaponized shame and memory, retelling things with herself as martyr and me as the ungrateful child. Now the truth was a damp, cool thing. Documents, signatures, recorded phone messages. Facts don't care about your tone. That fact saved me. The day we filed the counterpetition to freeze the trust, I felt the familiar double thud of fear and possibility. Filing that paperwork was the legal equivalent of slamming a door. It prevented transfers, it forced full disclosure, and most importantly, it sent a message: you will not rewrite history with your pen. Her lawyer responded with the bluster I expected: threats of defamation, the usual insinuations that I was trying to erase the family. Their filings were dramatic and broad, full of the kind of language people use when they want to scare courts into action rather than persuade them with evidence. We answered each claim with patience. Denise would hand me a folder at night and say, "This is your truth. Read it. Sleep on it." I read it until the edges blurred and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: confidence. My story didn't rely on emotion, it relied on proof. I'd been presented as unstable. Here were the logs and bank statements that said otherwise. I'd been accused of cutting people off. Here were the messages showing threats and attempted financial access. I'd once been the family scapegoat. Now I was the plaintiff with receipts. Part of the plan was psychological. We let mom think she had momentum. I stopped posting about the blog. I pulled away from friends who liked to gossip, and I adopted an almost eccentric quiet. It did what I hoped. She grew bolder. She filed motions, published a sympathetic op-ed styled letter to the local community through a friend who ran a small neighborhood newsletter, and began trying to rally relatives. She believed she could drown truth in noise. She didn't realize that noise became evidence when it contradicted her own documents. The hearing date came on a raw, windy morning. I remember the sky like a giant sheet of gray paper. The courthouse smelled like stale coffee and new printer ink. Sarah held my hand in the hallway until it felt like it might be bruised, and Ella and Max sat in the front row behind us, doing their best to sit still while their legs jiggled like little engines. Seeing them there, trusting me to keep the world safe, focused something in my chest that had been drifting since December. Courtrooms are theater with rules. People perform their grief and their righteousness under oath, and the judge listens like a slow-turning machine, making records and later decisions. Mom arrived surrounded by a small knot of family allies. Nate with a look of righteous outrage, Danielle with a practiced concern, Aunt Linda with sympathetic eyes. She wore a coat that screamed, "I deserve sympathy," the soft cashmere that has always been part of her costume. She smiled at the gallery like someone who knows the camera will be kind. She didn't expect quiet. She didn't expect the stack of notebooks Denise had prepared, bank logs annotated, email threads printed in chronological order, the school's written report, photographic evidence of her at our house taking pictures of documents, Dad's handwritten notes, and the letter Grandpa had tucked away, the one that named me the steward of the family's legacy. We presented it all with a calmness that made the whole room listen. One of the most satisfying moments was watching the way the judge's expression tightened as he read an email where Mom asked about declaring an heir inactive. The phrase looked absurd on paper, a bizarre concept from someone who'd always insisted family ties trump paperwork. But there it was, in black and white. Denise let it hang there for a few seconds like a punctuation mark, then moved on. We didn't rely on emotional monologues. I kept my statements short, precise. When I testified, it felt less like telling a story and more like delivering coordinates, dates, times, actions. I refused to let my voice crack when I said that Ella had cried on Christmas, that Max had asked if Santa forgot us, that I had found out about the $5,000 withdrawal by checking my bank app at 7 a.m., that a lawyer had told me a forged claim could ruin a career. Each small, steady detail built the skeleton of what had happened. But the part that felt like real leverage was the father's testimony. My dad walked in with a slight stoop, but when he spoke under oath, he did so with a clarity that made the entire courtroom catch its breath. He recounted the late-night sessions in the study, the way my mother had started scanning documents, how she'd argued that the family deserved recompense for years of what she called sacrifice. He didn't sound like a man making accusations. He sounded like a man who had finally decided not to be a passenger in his own life. Nate's face went through colors. He looked furious when Dad testified, like someone watching a house of cards disappear. Allison from HR, the woman Mom had emailed, testified about the odd forwarded message that had landed on my boss's desk. She confirmed it had been anonymous and that its claims were unsubstantiated. The web Mom had spun to try to pull me into disrepute unraveled because people who were not on her payroll testified to what they had seen and what they hadn't. Then came the tactical blow that felt almost cruel in its elegance. Denise had quietly obtained confirmation from the bank that Mom had indeed attempted to request a new debit card linked to my account, and that the $5,000 withdrawal had been made to a dealer who sold a used truck to Nate. That money trail tied the emergency to my brother's vehicle. Nate protested, but the receipts painted a pattern. He had been a participant, not an innocent bystander. Watching Nate's face as one piece of paper after another connected him to transactions was oddly satisfying. Not because I wanted to humiliate him, but because I wanted the truth exposed. For years he'd enjoyed the benefits and the applause. Now he had to face the ledger. He sputtered through his testimony, shifting blame to Mom, insisting he'd never asked for money. The receipt said otherwise. The judge's pen scratched quietly. Mom took the stand last. She was practiced under oath, gracious, wounded, fierce. She told a narrative of devotion and sacrifice, of how she'd given everything for her children and now felt betrayed by the one who had been the favorite. Her voice had the practiced cadence of someone used to being believed. But between the lines, she made the fatal mistake I'd baited her into. She implied that financial support was a form of ownership. Ownership, in a courtroom, smells a lot like fraud. Denise pounced politely. She asked about specific dates, about why certain documents appeared scanned in the middle of the night, why a bank request appeared in my account's record just after our confrontation. Mom's answers started to contradict themselves. Her narrative fractured into defensive fragments. Somewhere in that testimony, the mask slipped. It wasn't the court's gavel that did it. It was the tilt of her chin, the way she suddenly looked small and human, exhausted by her own web. Then came the moment that made the room tilt. Denise produced a ledger Dad had found. A real, handwritten ledger that showed her recording family loans and then, in a different hand, later entries where she'd altered numbers. The ledger's ink had faded in places, but forensic analysis, quietly arranged before the hearing, made it clear entries had been added after the fact. The judge held the book like a relic, his mouth thinning. Mom's face went white. For the first time, I saw panic flicker through that well-rehearsed composure. She tried to recover with a well-placed anecdote about sacrifice, but even her allies shifted in their seats uncomfortably. The courtroom has little mercy for those who manufacture grief for gain. It's an old rule. People expect parents to be messy, but they do not expect parents to falsify ledgers. When Denise rested, the air felt different. It wasn't victory yet. Courts are slow and cautious, but the momentum had swung. My father's testimony, the email timestamps, the bank confirmations, the ledger with its altered entries, it all pointed in the same direction. We had taken a lifetime of manipulative behavior and translated it into a legal narrative that couldn't be waved away. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited with their polite questions and cheap coffee. Our small local piece the week prior had triggered some interest. A community magazine had run an op-ed about protecting families from financial predators, citing our case tangentially. We declined every camera. This wasn't about page views, it was about safety. That evening, as we drove home, Sarah reached over and squeezed my hand. "You did it," she said quietly, not triumphant so much as relieved. Ella and Max were asleep in the back, their breaths soft and even. "I didn't do it alone," I said. "Dad did the hardest part." I thought about him sitting in that courtroom, his hands steady for the first time since I was a child. I thought about how loyalty can show up late, but still be real. Back at home, my inbox held a polite legal notice. The judge had issued a temporary injunction preventing any transfer of trust assets and had ordered a forensic audit of the family accounts. It was the legal equivalent of a hand closing around a throat. For now, initiative had been taken away. For now, Mom could not move the pieces. I slept with a light on that night, not from fear, but from a wariness that comes after battle. The next morning, as I made coffee, the silence in the house felt thicker but cleaner, like glass that had been wiped after being cracked. And yet, I knew the story wasn't over. My mother is not the type to fold gracefully. In her world, being trapped is just another uncomfortable stage that precedes the comeback. She had allies I hadn't accounted for, neighbors who adored her, a cousin who still believed her stories, a small circle who would stand with her publicly no matter what the papers said. The day the audit report arrived, Denise called and told me to come into her office. I felt a rush of something like fear. The audit could either be the final nail or the opening for another campaign. We sat across from her, and she opened the file. "There's a round of transactions here," she said. "Not all of them are directly to your mother. But there are patterns, gifts, reimbursements, and one thing that stands out." She flipped a page, and a line underlined itself in my head. "There's evidence that suggests attempted interference with the trustee's communications. Phone records showing calls at odd hours from a number registered to your mother." She looked up at me. "Someone tried to intercept trustee correspondence." My throat tightened. Intercept correspondence meant tampering with the legal process. It meant an escalation. My pulse quickened not from panic, but from the cold recognition of intent. Who would have the most to gain if they could silence the trustees? Denise asked. I stared at the file, at the list of contacts and call logs. The names were petty, the amounts sometimes laughable, but the pattern was clear. A network of favors, small and large, threaded through our town. People who'd benefited from being on the right side of Mom's benevolence. "And Nate?" I asked. She paused. He's connected in places he shouldn't be. A used car dealer who received payments. A contractor who suddenly forgave a debt. This is a network, Luke. It isn't just your mother. It's an ecosystem. The word ecosystem lodged in my chest. I had been fighting a single person. It turned out I'd been fighting a network. The idea of a wider conspiracy to rewrite family property made my hands go cold. But cold can be useful. Cold is focus. When I left her office, I felt oddly energized. Revenge had never been about spectacle for me. It was about ending the harm. If there was a network, we would map it. If there were co-conspirators, we would expose them. If the judge would only allow a forensic audit, then we would make that audit tell the truth. Over the next week, I coordinated quietly. Dad finding old receipts, Sarah contacting school officials, Denise subpoenaing records. We moved with care. Each phone number traced, each bank entry cross-checked. Some leads fizzled. Others snapped into place. A contractor's canceled check led to a shell company. A neighbor's mortgage payment revealed itself as a loan later paid by mom. The threads multiplied until the picture was ugly and complete. And then, on a gray Tuesday afternoon, a new envelope arrived, stamped by the court clerk and heavy with paper. I opened it hands first and felt my heart lurch as my eyes took in the words, Notice of Trial Date. Full hearing on fraudulent conveyance and third-party conspiracy. This was it, the moment we'd built toward. The judge would hear everything, not just the preliminary injunction, but the full case. The ledger alterations, the bank transfers, the attempted trustee interference, the network of favors. The room would be full of people who'd whispered my mother's narrative into willing ears for years. They would be there to see which story held up under scrutiny. I slept badly that night, not because I doubted what we could prove, but because I knew that after this hearing, nothing would be the same. Families split by logic and love rarely stitch back together the same way. The children we protected would know the truth in a way they couldn't unlearn. My father might finally be free of a life built on quiet compromises, and my mother, I didn't know what would become of her. I only knew I had to finish what I'd started. The courthouse felt larger the morning of the trial. Cameras were not allowed, but there were people there who had heard the snippets in the paper. The judge took his seat with the slow deliberateness of a man about to make a yardstick of right and wrong. Mom arrived wearing the same calm polish she'd worn before, but something in her posture had shifted. There was a weariness now, and a small, frantic look when the bailiff called the case. Denise stood, opened a thick file, and began. She laid out the evidence with precision, like a teacher demonstrating a proof. The trustee records, the bank logs, the ledger, the emails, the phone records that showed attempts to reach trustees at odd hours, payments to third parties who later produced invoices that didn't align with the work claimed. She laid it out like a timeline, a chain of custody of malicious intent stretching from Christmas Day to the present. Mom's lawyer rose to object, to deflect, to paint motives and grievances. He tried to paint my actions as a son gone vindictive, a man using the legal system to punish his mother. He was practiced, and for a moment, his words found a few sympathetic faces in the gallery. Then Denise called my father to the stand. He walked up slow, but his voice was clear. He recounted the late-night sessions, the ledgers, the times he'd tried to speak up and been shut down. When he finished, he looked toward Mom, and for the first time in years, she could not look back with a practiced smile. The prosecution had one more piece. A subpoenaed email from Mom to the same boutique attorney she'd emailed weeks before our last hearing. Proceed with steps to secure family assets. If Luke is uncooperative, we will proceed without him. The email was short, clinical. Mom's face registered shock. Not because the email existed. She had written it, but because in the sterile light of the courtroom, her motives were suddenly undeniable. She rose then, sudden and fierce, and the room leaned forward like a single organism. She accused us of collusion, of poisoning a man's home, of fabricating evidence. Her voice was loud and finally unguarded. She asked how we could betray family. She asked how I could turn my back on the woman who'd raised me. Denise answered quietly, methodically. Family doesn't mean ownership, she said. It means trust. And when trust is weaponized, the law intervenes. Mom's eyes slid to Nate, then to Aunt Linda, then finally to me. For a moment, in that charged stillness, something in her broke. Her expression dropped, not a carefully placed mask, but a raw, unstitched face that looked weary, and suddenly very small. She opened her mouth. The entire gallery inhaled. And then she said something none of us expected. The moment she opened her mouth, the room went still. Her voice didn't carry the defiance I expected. It came out cracked, trembling, like something inside her had finally collapsed under its own weight. "I did it," she said. No one moved. Even her lawyer froze mid-gesture. "I did it," she repeated, louder this time. "I changed the records. I thought, if I just put everything back under my name, we could be a family again. I thought he'd forgive me when he saw I was protecting what's ours." The judge's pen stopped. The sound of pages turning died. You could almost hear her words echo against the walls. Denise said quietly, "Mrs. Hill, are you admitting to falsifying financial documents and misrepresenting ownership of the trust?" Mom's shoulders sagged. "I was just trying to fix what was broken," she whispered. "Luke took everything. He took the family, the house, the name. I had to get it back." For years I'd imagined her admitting the truth, how satisfying it would be to hear her say the words. But standing there, watching the woman who raised me unravel in front of a courtroom, it didn't feel like victory. It felt like the end of something that had died long before any of us had the courage to bury it. The judge's tone was measured but sharp. "Mrs. Hill, this court will recess for 10 minutes. Counsel, remain available." When he left the bench, murmurs filled the room. Mom slumped into her chair, staring at her hands. Nate looked around helplessly, like a man whose map had just turned into ashes. Aunt Linda started crying softly into a tissue. I sat perfectly still. Sarah's hand found mine and squeezed. After the recess, the judge returned and delivered the decision with the deliberate calm of someone who had seen every kind of family disaster pass through his courtroom. "The evidence presented today establishes a pattern of fraudulent behavior designed to manipulate legal assets and harass an heir through misuse of financial systems. Effective immediately, all trust assets are to remain frozen under independent administration. Mrs. Hill, you are hereby removed as co-trustee and barred from acting on behalf of the family estate." Mom's lawyer tried to interrupt, but the judge raised a hand. "Furthermore," he continued, "given the fraudulent withdrawals and the attempt to access Mr. Hill's accounts, restitution in the amount of $5,000 plus legal fees is ordered. Any continued harassment or attempts at contact outside of supervised mediation will be grounds for criminal investigation." There was no cheering, no gavel slam. Just silence, heavy absolute. Mom didn't look at me as the bailiff handed her the documents. Nate muttered something under his breath, a bitter string of words that even he didn't seem to believe. Dad sat quietly, eyes fixed on the table, hands folded like a man saying a prayer for something that could never be restored. When the judge stood, the room began to empty. I didn't move until everyone else had gone. Then I turned to look at her. She was still sitting there, staring straight ahead. For a moment, I saw the woman from my childhood, the one who made birthday cakes from scratch, who used to hum while folding laundry, who once told me I could be anything I wanted. But the hum was gone, the light was gone, and in its place sat someone hollowed out by control and pride. "Mom," I said quietly. Her eyes flicked toward me, dull and wet. "You won," she whispered. "Are you happy now?" I shook my head. "No, Mom. I'm free. There's a difference." She flinched, like the word free was an insult. I left the courtroom without looking back. The fallout spread like smoke. News of the case made its way through our small town faster than I expected. People whispered, of course, they always do, but most of them didn't know the details. All they knew was that something had gone terribly wrong in the Hill family. Nate and Danielle sold their house 2 months later. Rumor was they'd burned through their savings trying to pay their legal fees. He sent me one text before they moved. "I hope you're proud." I didn't respond. Dad and I spoke a few times after the trial. He sounded lighter, almost peaceful. He told me he'd started volunteering at a local veterans center, something he'd always wanted to do but never had the time for. The last time we met for coffee, he said quietly, "I'm sorry it took me this long to stand up." "You did it when it mattered," I said. He smiled a little. "Still," he added, "I wish I'd been braver when you were a boy." A month later, he moved into a small apartment downtown. He never mentioned Mom again. As for her, she faded from the spotlight. She lost most of her friends after the audit findings became public record. The woman who used to command every room now avoided them. I heard she'd started attending church again, sitting in the back row where no one would notice her. I didn't hate her. That surprised me. I thought I would. That after everything, after the betrayal, I'd feel nothing but bitterness. But all I felt was a quiet sadness. Because even when the truth finally came out, she still couldn't see what she'd done. She'd rather lose everything than admit she couldn't control me anymore. Life after that felt clean. My blog took off faster than I could have imagined. A podcast invited me on to talk about financial abuse in families, and the episode went viral. People started writing to me from all over: sons, daughters, spouses, even parents who'd been cut off by manipulative children. They thanked me for giving words to something they couldn't name. It didn't make me rich, but it gave me purpose. And purpose, I'd learned, was more valuable than money. Sarah and I bought a small cabin by the lake that summer. The kids called it the Peace House. We'd go there on weekends, no Wi-Fi, no screens, just fishing poles and board games. Sometimes I'd sit on the deck after everyone went to bed, watching the moon ripple across the water, and think about how far we'd come, how close I'd come to losing it all, and how grateful I was that I hadn't. One night, as we sat by the fire pit, Ella asked, "Dad, are we ever going to see Grandma again?" I looked at her for a long time, choosing my words carefully. "Maybe one day," I said, "when she learns how to love people without trying to own them." She nodded slowly, satisfied in that simple way kids are when they trust you to tell the truth. A few weeks later, I got a letter in the mail. No return address, but the handwriting was unmistakable, my mother's. It wasn't long. "Luke, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even know if I'd recognize it if you gave it. But I wanted you to know I'm sorry. Not for losing, for forgetting that you were never mine to control. Take care of the kids. Tell your father I'm fine. Mom." There was no address to reply to. No way to reach her even if I'd wanted to. I folded the letter and placed it in the same box as Grandpa's old note, the one that said I'd know what to do. I realized, as I closed the lid, that maybe this was what he meant. Not to win, but to end the cycle. To stop the inheritance of cruelty disguised as love. 6 months later, the court finalized everything. The trust was secured under independent management, the restitution paid, the accounts separated forever. For the first time in decades, my name was clean, legally, financially, emotionally. On the day I received the final notice, I took it out to the lake. The wind was warm, carrying the scent of pine and water. Sarah was inside with the kids, their laughter floating faintly from the cabin. I lit a small match and watched the paper curl, the ashes scattering into the water. It wasn't anger that I felt. It was release. Sometimes revenge isn't a grand explosion. Sometimes it's just the quiet act of taking back your life and living it better than the people who tried to break you. As the last ember faded, I whispered something, not to her, but to the boy I used to be. The one who sat at Christmas watching everyone else open gifts and wondered what he'd done wrong. "You did enough," I said. "You were always enough." Then I stood, walked back toward the cabin where my family was waiting, and closed the door behind me. And for the first time in my life, I didn't look back.